entries. The pictorial sources are all from either the corpus of Indus seals and inscriptions, 3 volumes of which were put together by Oscar Parpala with an Indian team and then a Pakistani team, and so on. And I have also generously borrowed material from harappa.com, which is an online resource for anything Indus. So with that core bibliography, let me jump into today's topic. Before I want to talk about the unicorn, and before I want to say what this unicorn calling is all about, I first want to put a few disclaimers about what the unicorn is not. Because by elimination, we try to understand what the unicorn is, and therefore we will first eliminate what it is not. Certainly, the unicorn is not a religious symbol. We do not find the unicorn featured thus narrative seals, where religious or ritualistic scenes depicted, and unicorn is conspicuously absent from those seals where Indus people seem to be narrating their stories and their rituals and their religion and aspects of their religions and rituals. A single seal is not a single seal is found in any of the...
Wrapped up. So you're coming tomorrow.
No, but you said...
I'm fine if you want to do it tomorrow.
Not a single seal. This is not true of just the unicorn seal, but any seal is found in the relatively few graves found to date, and therefore that also eliminates the possibility or the probability that this was either a religious symbol or a royal relic of sorts, such as we found a lot of in the Egyptian pyramids and other burial sites. So it's neither of these. So what the unicorn is, what exactly is it? So we will go into this in detail and try and come away with some learning, and that is really the core subject for today's talk. The unicorn features as a field symbol on an Indus seal. So when I say field symbol, what I mean is this. This is the unicorn, and this is a field symbol. On a seal, there are other elements. There is a text, and there is this object in front of that field symbol. And field symbol is a terminology introduced by Iravatham Mahadevan. So I stick to that field symbol term. Other people use motifs. People say animal motifs, and there are many other terminologies available for that. But I will, by and large, stick to the standard terminology of field symbol. So according to Dennis Frenez, it is a motif engraved to a compositional syntax. When we talk about a compositional syntax, the syntax is right in front of our eyes, right there. The unicorn is there. There is always an object in front of it, and there is a short line of text above it. And this is more or less a universal convention and the compositional syntax for all Indus seals, at least a majority of them. But there are always some exceptions here and there. So the unicorn and most of the other animals that are also shown, they are shown in profile. They are shown in front of, quote unquote, an enigmatic object. We will also examine the enigma of this object that we are seeing right in front of our eyes at the moment. And these two, that is the enigmatic object and the field symbol, almost always feature under a short line of scriptorial signs or text. The text is carved in mirror image so that it can be read correctly once stamped on clay or other soft materials, which are basically used for sealing rooms and containers. So these are it is suggested here by Frenez and many archaeologists that these seals were used to seal rooms. That is, these seals, they used a blotch of clay on top of the container to be sealed, and put that clay and stamped the seal on that clay, just so the seal, the container is secure, the contents of the container are secure, and also provenance of the container is very clearly established. So that is what the field symbol called the unicorn, and many other animals as field symbols come to stand for in a standard compositional syntax in here. Okay, so let me advance. Oh, there are other field symbols. You can see this is presented in the diminishing order. The first is unicorn. Not the image, but on the left, the text you read, it's presented in the diminishing order of frequency. The unicorn is the most frequent. Then comes the bison, the buffalo, the zebu, elephant, tiger, wild goat, antelope, rhinoceros, hare, chimera, composite creatures and animals. These are the this is the summary of the field symbol in Indus seals, and you can see many of them on the right. Not all of them, but many of them. You can see the elephant, you can see the zebu, you can see the rhino, the mountain goat or the ibex. You can see the bison, you can see the tiger, you can see composite animals, the chimera, and you can finally see the man seated in an asana position. So all these are part of Indus field symbolism, right? So just so we understand exactly what's going on here, so I want to place the context. The unicorn is found in almost all the excavated Indus sites and also in West Asia. It accounts for 70% of all field symbols known from Indus. Its timeline and the trade timeline roughly begins at 2600 BCE and lasts until 1900 BCE when the Indus Valley civilization collapsed. And within that, in Mesopotamia, which has been Indus' main trading partner, sees the early dynasties from 2600 to 2300 BCE, and then the Akkadian dynasty from 2300 to 150 BCE, and then we see the post-Akkadian and Ur-3 dynasties from 2100 to 2000 BCE, and then we see the Isin Larsa and Old Babylonian 2000 to 1600, and by the time Old Babylonian takes root, Indus has kind of vanished from the scene. So this is the time span in which this one must have been seen by people in Indus and people outside of Indus in active use and as meaning something concrete and as a marker of material transaction at some level, apart from the other connotations and meanings that it may very well have had. So that is the context. The functional values. This is what we will be concentrating mostly on. So we will spend a little bit more time on this particular slide than on the others. So Dennis Frenes, in the paper that I cited earlier, talks about the functional values of the Indus seals as tokens of an administrative technology of a structured bureaucracy to control rooms and containers. The container is a key word here. It keeps surfacing, and we will see it. We will narrow our focus in many ways. It is stamped on clay ceilings to seal a container. So the stamping on clay ceilings is what you're seeing as the image on the right, with the text on the left on the slide that I'm showing you now. Okay, so these seals are the unicorn seal or any other seal, the elephant seal or any other seal that the Indus people make in their workshops are used for stamping on clay, like we see in front here. The stamping on clay could be provisionally at the moment. That is, our understanding will change a few slides down the line, but provisionally for now can easily be understood as a receipt marked by the receiver as a mark of having received the goods. So the stamp is marked on clay, to acknowledge that such a receipt is in. Anshumali Bahata Anshumali Mukhopadhyay, she believes that the seals and the language represented on the Indus seals basically stood for some form of a tax token or a trade license or metrological records that express quantities, and or as a combination of the above in varying degrees. So that's another strong hypothesis in the material school. I'm essentially focusing on the material school. Many spiritual values, religious values have been pointed out to in the context of unicorn and the texts accompanying the unicorn, that we will come to ultimately. Rajesh Rao has made a very interesting hypothesis that the offshoots of the seals, that is the clay stamps produced with these seals or clay stamps attached to these seals sometimes produce an independent rationing and administration of labor workflow. That is an interesting point of view as well. Jonathan Markinoyer, the foremost archaeologist of our time, talks about the Indus seal and the unicorn imagery and all animal imagery, field symbolism on Indus seals as representing clans, officials, and their additional traits such as generosity, such as astuteness, and other traits like those. And he believes, Kenoyer also believes, that it represented the aristocracy or the merchants involved in governance. I'm sorry. The aristocracy or the merchants involved in governance, implementation of laws, religious practices, and economic standards, and that was it. And Fair Service in 1984 was the first one to kind of steer the Indus field symbolism value into some kind of a functional value by claiming that they represent totemic symbols. And before that, we understand that all of them were only talking about it in terms of religion and the intangible qualities of these seals and what they represented. So these are the functional values. This is a very brief summary of a very vast amount of literature and is more than likely to be simplistic in its summarization. So please bear with me on that. So now I come to my hypothesis, having placed in front of you what has been said by the others. And that hypothesis is the Indus unicorn was a symbol of a courier-based trading system conducted through emissaries, intermediaries, or a combination of both. This is different from a modern courier-based trading system where the courier is a separate institution in itself and it has its own methods and administration. Here, in an ancient system, when we talk about a courier, we are talking about a personal carrier who is a direct emissary of the producers of the goods or the producer of the goods themselves. They go carrying the goods, and the unicorn was a symbol of such a courier-based trading system conducted through emissaries, sometimes also through intermediaries, because it involved a long distance from Harappa to Uruk in Mesopotamia, which is, I think, 3,600 kilometers. So in the distance trade, they needed some kind of a courier-based trading system and a cargo advice for the courier-based trading system. And my hypothesis is that is what the unicorn symbolism represents. As a stamp, so it was an instrument in cargo logistics, and it always marked a destination. That is, the unicorn was an address marker, and by that logic, so was every other animal that was represented as a field symbol on an Indus seal. All these animals were a to address marker. So when you need to send me mail, you send it to Bhaskar and you write Bhaskar, and Bhaskar is usually more prominently written than the sender. That is your name. In this case, also the same convention, except that they can't write Bhaskar, or they can't write Ashurbanipal or Ur Nammu. So they pictorially represent the destination for Uruk or any destination X with an animal, and the most frequent animal that represents an address turns out to be the unicorn in Indus. And this is all my hypothesis. We will deconstruct this hypothesis and try to find out whether it holds water, it does not hold water. If it does, how far? If it doesn't, why? And so on and so forth. Okay. By its construction, the seal was also an adornment. It was a wearable, and as a wearable, it represented the merchant that was centrally authorized to ply the trade to a specific address or specific addresses. And that's why in the bottom image on the right, you can see the back of the seal, a boss on the seal, and a hole to put a thread through. And anybody can put a thread through and wear it around neck, arm, wrist, wherever, as well as join other such items into that string as demanded through the transit points and the journeys and the various records that kept accumulating through the journey. So that I advance is the primary purpose of the unicorn symbolism, field symbolism on the Indus markers. Okay, so a courier-based trading system and cargo logistic marker is somewhat analogous to the check-in baggage tag that we all are used to. I board the plane in Chennai and I'm traveling to New York via Dubai, and I'm not going to see my baggage in Dubai. I'm not going to claim it. It's going to go straight through to New York. But in between, the cargo handlers will be able to unload, if need be, unload the cargo that is stamped for New York and put a transit stamp on it before loading it onto the vessel that carries it to New York. And therefore there, the destination marker, it is not the names of people, it is not the from address, it is not the goods, or it is not anything else. It is a destination marker that has to be absolutely obvious and evident to everybody that handles it, and therefore that takes the prominent position above everything else, above the logos, about statuses, about other symbols, and all the other things that can clutter and fight for their attention. They all have to be offloaded in that context, and only the destination has to be presented in a manner that is crystal clear so that the cargo doesn't get mishandled and sent to a different destination. So which is why you see in all these baggage tags, you see the destination marker the most prominently. You don't see my name, the traveler, the passenger's name, or anything like that. That's on my baggage tag. I will also have the counterfoil of this check-in baggage tag with me for my ultimate claim when I pick up the luggage. So that's a different thing. So in early courier trade-based systems, cargo movement was personally accompanied by at least one merchant representative. So this key to understand this, as I said, this is not a third-party courier with their own organization, with their own administration, with their workflow, with their own reporting systems, and so on and so forth. It's not become an organized courier industry yet. That would take a few more centuries, closely followed by the postal system, all of whom will actually use this logistic marking and this way of handling cargo subsequently, but we don't see that because it gets buried. This logic gets buried in those systems deep down. In Indus symbolism and on Indus seals, this is in the face for us to see it immediately. So the emissary carried the seal. So the from address did not have to be marked because the person, the seller of the goods, he or she is there personally himself or herself. So they don't have to put their name, they don't have to engrave their name, waste that space, and they don't have to engrave their whys and wherefores and their country and so on and so forth. They can simply concentrate on key information such as goods carried, place carried to. Simple. And the emissary marked the ultimate address on the cargo to, let us say, from Harappa to Lothal or to Dilmun or to Magan or ultimately to Uruk or any other ultimate destination. And we know that there were many ultimate destinations and not just Uruk. I'm simplifying and keeping things to a single value for the sake of easy comprehension for myself and others. In a vast network, which begins in, let us say, Mohenjo-daro, and then goes to Dholavira, and from Dholavira it goes to Lothal, and then it goes to Dulmun, and then it goes to Uruk. The emissary would use an intermediary for at least a part of the distance, if not for all of it. The intermediary would receive the cargo and stamp it, and this intermediary may be a trading partner who in turn needs to be compensated for handling the cargo, or this will be as itself, in which case he's seen less as that outpost is seen less as an intermediary, but more as a branch that reports to the Harappan authorities. And that kind of movement also would have and might have taken place. And we see a profuse mix of all of these. As I said, I'm giving you simple strands of thought. So which in its entirety is analogous to the through check-in baggage tag logic, which is what we are exposed to. Somebody who works in the port trust or somebody works in railways who's familiar with cargo and container movement will be able to see many more layers, and they will be able to understand it for what it is much better than you and I can. But I think a simple post office logic also suffices, which is if you see the two address to a post office, all of them will be the same post office box number, PO box number, or the same PIN code. You will not have multiplicities over there unless that post office also handles cargo from various places for that cargo to be forwarded to another place, in which case that place will be marked, the ultimate destination will be marked most prominently, and the post office that is handling it will be marked as a transit destination. So that is essentially the logic. All of us can understand it with some familiarity, even in the modern context. So as a concept, though it is abstract, we see it all around us, and therefore we can understand. At least that's what I believe. Yeah. When I claim that this is a cargo stamp, it is all right to hypothesize, but is there any evidence? Is there any proof for such a claim? I found these seals in Lothal. Wherever I found, please don't mistake me, I'm not an archaeologist. I'm not going and digging and finding it in Lothal. Archaeologists have found a rare hoard in Lothal of about 70 clay stampings, like the two that you see on screen. And these are about only one of two instances where we actually find clay stamped ceilings in any part of Indus. And therefore, this is very rare evidence. Usually, these seals are destroyed. They don't survive time. These are clay seals. But in Harappa, a fire accident seems to have baked it into a certain hardness, and therefore about 70 of those 70 such stamped clay ceilings ended up preserving themselves. And from those, I picked these two examples, and all the 70 are available in the corpus of Indus inscriptions and ceilings presented in the 3-volume corpus by Parpola and his team. I just picked these two alone to illustrate, and you can see on the left, you have the unicorn stamp that is left on the clay, and on the right, you have the elephant stamp that's left on the clay. So from here, I'm making a leap, saying that, and these were both found in Lothal. So Lothal is a port. Lothal is the opening to the sea route from the Indus Union to the Western trade, to Oman, to Bahrain, to Mesopotamia, and to Persia, and so on. So if a lot of the marine trade happened through Lotal, and Lotal could be thought of as something like Mumbai is today to India on the west coast. All the shipments and majority of the trade happens from that. So there we see a unicorn stamp and an elephant stamp, and I assume provisionally again, though it is a big leap, that the unicorn seal is meant as a marker on onward cargo to Mesopotamia, and the elephant seal is marked on cargo meant for Lotal itself. And there is no evidence when I say this that both of them, both these seals originated from the same place. They may have originated from two different places, but it is equally likely two such seals originated Dolavira or Harappa or Rakigiri or Kalibangan or anywhere, and they could have come to Lotal with one consignment that says, hey, this is for your consumption, and hey, this one is for you to advance it to across the seas to West Asia. So I am provisionally reading it as such for now, without claiming it to be true. But it's very, very clear. At least one part of it is clear by now, I think, reasonably clear by now, that the logic of it being a destination marker, that is the field symbolism being a destination marker, is somewhat holding up as we speak, though not fully fleshed out yet. Okay, so from there I proceed to, so am I saying that unicorn equals Mesopotamia? How? Why? I'm in this session, this is essentially the claim that I'm advancing, and we're going to examine that claim. We're going to take it apart, deconstruct it, and examine it. So that is actually my intention in presenting this. So if we deconstruct the Indus seal as a cargo advice, so we have three elements: the field symbol as a destination marker, the object in front, which I propose is a cargo standard. Nobody has proposed it as a cargo standard. It is always referred to as the mystery object, and nobody knows the meaning or the significance of that mystery object. Several values have been proposed historically. Somebody has read it as an incense burner. Iravatham Mahadevan, for instance, read it as a filter standard, the Soma filter. So many people have read it as many things. I am proposing that it should be read as a cargo standard, and hopefully there will be enough logic to support that hypothesis as we go on. And the text above it is actually the cargo description, though. So this is also the compositional syntax that we talked about earlier. And when we deconstruct it elementally, this is what we see: a field symbol, an object in front of the field symbol, and some text that sits at the top of it, which is the description of the cargo itself. Okay. I will now concentrate from the field, from the object, the so-called mystery object. So on the left, I'm showing you the mystery object. The mystery object has three parts to it from the top to bottom. It's got a grid work at the top. It's got a bowl shape at the bottom, and it's got a stem that the whole thing is standing on. These are the three parts. Now, in the graphic in the middle, you see row 2 and 3 and 4. We will go through the row 2, which is row 2A. 2A is basically a grid of 4 by 7 or 4 by 5 or 3 by 5 or 2 by 7 or a square of 4 by 4 with a variation in the shape and something at the top as well, which incidentally, if it's a cargo, is actually the hook that a crane can lift it with, and today we see it everywhere. That is also there in row B on top of this. We'll come to that. And then you have grids of various sizes. And in some grids, we have only the vertical lines. And in some grids, we have only the horizontal lines. And altogether, they represent a stack of something, a grid work of something, a container that has horizontal stacks, vertical stacks in certain numerical arrangement in rows and columns. And in row B, these acquire a slightly different complexity. For instance, you have a herringbone type grid in cloth shape. They are not just a suggestion of an abstract geometrical shape such as a square, but it represents an object such as a cloth with that curvature. And herringbone grid may well represent textile cargo. C, I have no clue what it is. 2D are the same grids that seem to be enclosed in some kind of dome structure. It's a domed grid rather than squared grids. And then the unicorn also appears, but very rarely, as without a object or mystery object in front of it. And so this cult object, as I understand it, is simply a cargo standard. It immediately tells everybody who sees the fleet information, the fleet level information. If you look at the bowl, go to row 3 and look at A, B, C, D, E. So they represent a whole lot of basket weaves, rope lattice work, dotted pottery, and all kinds of containers, which are probably less geometric in shape, but more organic, such as pots and jars, so on, which are usually housed in the basement or places where the center of gravity would have to be low. They are stacked at the bottom. And sometimes the cargo type, it seems, is also marked on these bowls, as is evident in 4D, where you see drops of liquids falling off the container as though to indicate that this container carries liquids. So with all, I'm ignoring the top row, that is the row number 1 for the moment. We will see that in detail later. And just so that this imagery is kind of becomes familiar to the modern eye, I have placed the modern icon for a container here. So that's how a container is seen. It's always a grid work. A container is a grid and nothing else. And that's how we see it. Whether it was 5,000 years back or it is now, we see it as a grid. And it may also be said that this object itself has never been found anywhere in any excavation in Indus, because it is not an object in itself. It is an object that represents another object. And that super object that it represents, it does not have a validity beyond its transition stage through the transit route, after which it's all unpacked and taken apart, and individual unit goods go to the intended places as they are shared, as they are bought, as they are consumed. So therefore, this is an abstract entity, and therefore it is a kind of a cargo standard. It represents the cargo, but it is not the cargo itself. Right? That is how I understand the object in front. So from unicorn, we now extrapolate to not only the unicorn as a destination marker, but also all other animals as destination markers, which we have seen a glimpse of when we discussed Lotel and the clay stampings at Lotel, where we also found the elephant and not just the unicorn. So we find from top left, we see therefore, if we assume it to be a destination marker, then we see the first seal on the top left, as meant for the elephant country, the third one as meant for rhino country, the fourth one as meant for wild goat country, the fifth one for the water buffalo country, the sixth one for tiger country, etc., etc. And those that I have crossed out are different kinds of seals. They are not cargo destination marker seals at all. They represent some other administrative, social, or religious value, and they have nothing to do with the destination marker per se, or they may not even be talking cargo. they may be talking about something else altogether, completely different subject. And it is nice to know that, because then we don't get a unidimensional picture of Indus as simply people who moved cargo and did not do anything else in life. They did a lot more in life, and we see those aspects. Though I cannot get into those aspects themselves today, that is beyond the scope of this particular session. But they did a lot of other things besides send cargo and receive cargo, and they had other means of expressing them, other symbolisms to express them, and so on and so forth. That is all we need to know for the moment, as contrasted to the animal field symbolism that we encounter on Indus seals, right? I'm going to take a little bit of time to read chat messages. All right, nothing of consequence to me, so I proceed. Now, a cargo has a structure. Any cargo has a structure, okay? So a cargo is a fleet. I'm not talking about cargo independent. So cargo goes as a fleet, and within a fleet is a container, and within a container is a box or a jar, and there can be other containers within. So this nesting can reach a number of layers. I've simplified it and kept this nesting to 3 levels, namely fleet, container, box, or a jar. Okay, so there is fleet level cargo advice, there is container level cargo advice, there is unit level, which is box unit level cargo, to go out with the nested cargo structure of any kind, whether it was 5,000 years back in Indus times or whether it is today through Amazon delivery. This is fundamental to all cargo handling, regardless of if there is a workflow for handling cargo. If there is no workflow at all, then it's a different thing. If there is no expression at all, marking at all, then it's a different thing. But the moment there is a system that encapsulates cargo movement, that such a system will have to account for a nesting in all cargo structures, which will have at least 3 levels of information and 3 levels of goods from top to bottom: fleet, container, or a box or a jar. So the fleet level information, I posit, is the label or the seal. The seal is the label for the fleet. And then each container, that is, if we go back to the earlier slide, and we look at containers, they will have their own labeling with quantifiers and qualifiers and so on and so forth. The lowest level is the standard unit, a standard unit that is understood by people as a standard of that time. A box of a particular size, a jar of a particular size, like we understand, for lack of any other example, a Budweiser 6-pack today, for instance. Okay, so the standard metrics are understood in every generation, in every age, by the objects themselves, and they do not have to be specifically marked for quantity, except to say it is 1 jar or 2 jars or 3 jars or 4 jars, that each jar could contain 500 grams. We need not it is unlikely that such weights would have been marked there, because that volume or that weight would have been understood to be a standard at that time. Today we express much more in much more granular ways, but the 3 is the minimum, and these 3 can actually be seen alongside all seals at all sites. In fact, sometimes the same seal carries multiple levels of information, as we will see. And the sum of all this information represents the barter exchange value of goods sent. So we need to also understand that India was a barter-based economy and there was really no money there. That means when they sent goods, they expected to receive goods in return. And when they sent goods, they expected that some of the goods will be parted with as part of handling charges and intermediary commissions, and so on and so forth. So they paid for it in terms of goods. They earned it back in terms of other goods. So it was essentially a barter exchange token. So the seal stood at the top of the barter exchange information token is the structure of the information that I posit, without actually getting into the individual reading of the text itself.
When you say that you are hungry, what about others, Mark?
Did somebody mean to ask a question? Or should I go on? Should I ignore the question and go on?
Go ahead, Bhaskar.
Yeah. Okay. So so this is a cargo structure that's evident in any cargo. Without this basic minimum information, cargo cannot be handled. It's as simple as that. Receipts cannot be verified. They cannot be tallied. A transaction cannot be completed through its full circle. That would be necessary to deem a transaction complete. So the text on unicorn seals, the text that you see on top, they represented the goods. And I'm not reading any text itself today, except to indicate that these texts would have said, I'm sending so much gold, so much of precious stones, so much of ivory, so much of indigo textile, so much of farm produce such as honey, forest produce such as honey, and so much of farm produce such as barley or till, oil, or whatever. So this would have been a description of the goods, where necessary quantities may have been marked on the seal, but a lot of the quantities are marked themselves on the containers themselves, and therefore quantifying information on the seals are not that fully presented as we might expect to see in one round. So we need a combination of records actually at all the three levels that we saw earlier to be able to understand the full information of the cargo, and the seal itself may present only a partial information. So that structurally it has to be understood in those terms. Over a period of time, Indus also sent texts without any animal motif, without any kind of field symbolism. We don't know whether it followed an icon period, and then these icons began to be understood for what they were, and they were no longer necessary to be carved. That extra labor saved, the extra material could be saved, and therefore simply encoded as pure text, and this pure text would be understood for what it is, and then thereafter all the cargo transactions or any other kind of economic transaction can easily be fulfilled based on textual information alone, without dependencies on the iconic information that used to be there. I do not know whether there is a temporal order such as I seem to imply when I say this. They may have coexisted, or one may have succeeded the other, but the utility of the unicorn seal may have faded over time, and there may have been a period of coexistence of these two before pure text seals took over from icon plus cargo standard plus text-based seals. Much of which is speculation. I do not know, is closer to the truth. So I will leave it there. This is mainly to point out that there is, after all, other types of objects that do not have this field symbolism, and they have plain text, and plain text transactions could be understood and carried out as well in Indus time. Okay? It's merely to present that fact. Okay. So this, which brings us to the seal portfolio of an Indus city. Okay, so what kind of seals did an Indus city make? every city of consequence in Indus had unicorn seals, or they made unicorn seals. They had the workshops that made unicorn seals out of steatite, which is for common language understanding soapstone, but it is not exactly soapstone. As soapstone, these soapstones are fired to a very high temperature of, I think, almost 1,200 degrees, at which time these soapstones acquire not only a glaze and a polish and a whiteness, but also a hardness that is almost equal to granite. On the most scale, it goes up to about 6.5, as opposed to when it is a mined soapstone, which has a hardness of about 1 on the most scale. So this is processed soapstone, processed steatite, specialized, locally available Indus material, and unicorn seals were standardized out of those, and always carved on those. And every city had the capacity to make those, to the universal convention that seems to have been understood all over the Indus Union, from Meherabad, Daimabad in UP, and Shottagai in the north. Everybody seems to have understood that convention, and everybody seems to have had the technology to make these seals. And most of them, of course, had additional seals. That is, they had the unicorns. They knew to make the unicorn seals in there, and therefore the unicorn seals were there in their portfolio. They also made additional seals like the elephant seal, or a buffalo seal, or a markhor seal, or a ibex seal, and so on and so forth. Basically, that means if I am Harappa and if I am trading with 4 cities, I will have definitely at least 4 seals that I make regularly in my workshop, because I'm shipping goods to them and I need to put it on the cargo that this is meant for that particular destination, right? So the seal portfolio of a city I submit would be directly proportionate to the number of trading destinations that it has that it has dealings with. A city also had a seal to identify itself, but it was not used as cargo advice, which is why we saw earlier on these seals crossed out here. They probably had nothing to do with cargo movement. Probably each city represented itself. They were all icons of the cities that made them. They were meant for native expressions of different kind, and they had nothing to do with cargo marker, as it were. Okay. In the personal courier system, cargo advice was necessary only when a supply source was moving cargo with parts of it marked for onward movement. Otherwise, I didn't have to. I'm carrying it. I'll just go deliver. I'll orally transact it, and I will carry back whatever I need based on oral transaction with me. And that's it. End of matter. It is only when I have to serialize the cargo movement through an emissary or an intermediary or a combination from one entry point to another through several transit points that cargo markers become necessary. And when I send multiple cargoes to the same destination, I need to differentiate and tell the recipient that, hey, this is meant for you, and hey, this is meant for onward movement to the unicorn country. So from this, what we also understand, which is the conclusion that I place on the right, is therefore every Indus city worth its salt was sending cargo meant for the unicorn country, or the unicorn territory, or the unicorn city, or Mesopotamia, as I claimed earlier, which I have still not offered a logical reason for, which we will discover. So that is how it transpires in the personal courier. That is how the seal portfolio of an Indus, that is what it is likely to be. Now I come to why unicorn for Mesopotamia. Why? Arguably, this is a big arguably, maybe I should put it in bold, the unicorn imagery was not native to Indus, but was borrowed from Akkadian imagery. So this imagery was known to the Indus people, the one-horned animal, or the bull, which was always a bull, never a cow, which was always male, which was never a female. It was never a fertility marker, but a virility marker. This unicorn is known to have been a part of an Akkadian victory parade in Mesopotamia in the Akkadian period. And you see objective evidence for it on the right, where the unicorn is seen on a staff to the left, and to the right, the top right. In the top right imagery, in which you see many figures, there is one figure who's holding up that unicorn, who it is reconstructed, who's reconstructed, the leader of the process. And third, you can see a composite frieze with 6 bulls, and that is also a Mesopotamian or an Akkadian marker. So Indus people must have seen, the argument is that Indus people must have seen this, must have been exposed to the Akkadian imagery of the unicorn, and then Indus marketing typified the buyer or caricatured the buyer as unicorn, and then used that imagery as cargo code. Is the that I propose. But what does this mean? It also means that the unicorn has been sought to be studied as something that represents Indus, as a self, as a symbol of the self. But here I posit that it is not the symbol of the self, but it is actually the symbol of the other. This is how the Indus people referred to the other, and to the Indus people, Mesopotamia meant the unicorn. They typified it, they caricatured it, they used that symbolism for a functional purpose, namely as cargo advice. But at the same time, putting the unicorn, because we are sending it to the Mesopotamians, is not a trick of target marketing or advertising, where, for instance, we see the consumer's picture prominently played in put in an advertisement so as to grab their attention. That is the oldest known trick in the book of advertising. So we do target marketing. We show the people, the buyers themselves in the advertisement, sometimes without even showing the product. So it is not such a target marketing trick. It does not appear to be a trick of target marketing, but it appears to be an aspect of workflow expression for cargo movement. And this is a key point, and I will tell you why. This is where I'm pulling back a little bit on the claim that the unicorn actually meant Mesopotamia. It meant Mesopotamia, but within a certain context. So this, in summary, unicorn was a two-address marker that encoded Mesopotamia for Indus traders. It never encoded Mesopotamia for the Mesopotamians. Meaning, I did not ultimately deliver the goods with the unicorn imagery in Uruk or in Mesopotamian territory. But I sent the cargo throughout with unicorn imagery to the Indus network, and that Indus network was distributed far and wide beyond the Indus realm, in West Asia, in Bahrain, in Oman, and in various other places, and had reached to the Persia of the time, whatever Persia was called then, and the Mesopotamia of the time, and maybe even to the northern regions of Mesopotamia, such as Syria. And it is in fact believed that even earlier, Indus had reached as far as all these places, and even further beyond, even into Africa. So this is a very specific convention followed during a particular period of time when Indus merchants established outposts in West Asia, and they traded goods inland from various cities in the Indus realm and pushed it to Lothal, and Lothal in turn pushed it out to West Asia, to Bahrain or Oman, from whence it was all delivered to the ultimate destinations, whatever they were. So it has to be understood in that long chain. So it was essentially a cargo advice for handlers at transit points. So the unicorn meaning was a coded symbol for the Indus cargo handlers in transit, and it did not mean anything to the ultimate recipient, whoever that was. Okay. It was the fleet symbol, and there were other labels which I have covered already. As I had shown earlier, these are simply not sent as stamps. These were also worn around the people's neck or armband or around the wrist or wherever. So these seals simultaneously also represented the merchant class who were authorized to ply the overseas trade and the merchants that wore them. Okay, so it was also a societal symbol, a trade license, a personal adornment, and a cargo stamp, all of them rolled into one at a time when cargo invariably had some personal accompaniment in the form of an ancient courier system, which had an emissary, an intermediary, or a combination of the two through the transit stage from origin to destination. So that is the summary of why it is a cargo mark. So when I say Mesopotamia, it is not an advertising trick. It probably did not mean Mesopotamians, but it definitely meant Mesopotamia to all the Indus traders, and it was a code language or a code symbolism for code marking on the cargo label that went. So if unicorn was the other, what was the self of Indus? For that, we have to look at this majestic image on our right, the zebu. The zebu is the only bovine animal that has extraordinarily prominent horns and a very prominent hump and a dewlap that in itself weighs hundreds of kilos, probably, which is pure flesh. And now the bovine creature is not the only one to have dewlaps. We can see dewlaps in dogs. Many of our pet dogs, we love them for their dewlaps. Your boxers and those varieties, you have them amongst, I think, lizards. You have dewlaps among birds. You have dewlaps among, I think, even fish. But the combination of this very prominent horn, a very prominent hump, and the dewlap is available only in the zebu. And the zebu is completely indigenous to South Asia, as was its ancestor, Auroch, which was also indigenous to South Asia in the historical times. Its origins, of course, being the origin of life and not an origin of an artifact, goes back many millions of years before, at which time it had a non-South Asian ancestry as well. But as the Auroch, it has a very clear South Asian ancestry, and it is known to have spread from South Asia all the way into what we today know as the West Asian Peninsula regions, and beyond them even into Africa. This is a very well-known fact. And this zebu, which represents complete identification of the Indus realm, of all its people, is the native symbolism of the Indus. And that is also exemplified in the way the zebu seals are crafted as opposed to other seals. For instance, the zebu as a field symbol does not share its space with any object in front. There is no manger, there is no half measure, there is nothing in front. It stands in its singular majesty. Similarly, the inscriptions that are written on top of zebu are extremely economical, very clear to the people. Obviously, it is not clear to us today when we read them, but it must have been extremely clear and very prominent to the people of the Indus times. And you can see, for instance, I'm just going to do a speculative reading of this particular seal, mainly to impress upon the fact that zebu stood for great things. So if I go from right to left, which is the normal reading direction, that small line there stands for a salutation of whatever kind. We're not looking at it phonetically at all. We're looking at it only in terms of values. The second one, which is the wheel or the sun, we could say it represented the doctrine of the time, which was later called Ritha in Vedic times, then Dhamma or Dharma in the post-Vedic times. So much so today we call Dharma Chakra, and so we retain that value, and it had the same value even then, but a different phonetic value completely. But it has probably had the same semantic value. So you have the doctrine, and next to the doctrine, you have the image of the keeper of the doctrine, whose slate we see, whose lines of text we see, and he or she is the scribe that keeps the values of the doctrine. He or she is the record keeper. Next to that, we see the proclaimer of the doctrine with two hands out, priest in prayer position, and also in the position of an appeal, the proclaimer of the doctrine. And next to that person, we see the actual seal owner, who's the implementer of the doctrine, who controls the artifactual, artisanal, and the merchant class of Indus, of raw materials, production, distribution, economy, and so on and so forth. He's also the seal owner. In fact, you might wonder why I'm calling it seal owner. It's because actually, like a pen stand, that you and that object within it is a seal stand. That's how I'm reading it, and that is why I offer that particular value to the seal owner and the implementer of the doctrine. And 6, the treasury or the sponsor of the doctrine. So you can see all of them. You can see policy, money, executive, documentation, the actual policy in its abstraction. All of that can be seen in that depth and magnitude and in that clarity, and such elements are seen only with the zebu. With the unicorn, we are likely to see more of ivory and pearls and boxes and crates of something of mercantile class information, whereas here we see the higher level administrative class information. Of course, the zebu is outnumbered by unicorn. Like, I think the unicorn is 70% of all Indus symbolism on seals, and the zebu is less than 1% or something like that. But this is like the situation that we have with crows and peacocks today. The crows are the majority, but the peacocks are the national bird. So the zebu is the peacock of that time. The zebu represented all things of great value that Indus people natively cherished, and that was given the most prominence, and it was given the singular position on all of Indus expression. Yeah, so that is the zebu. I intended this talk to be a tribute to Iravatham Mahadevan, but as fate would have it, it had to also become a tribute to Courier-based, who passed away on the 17th of November. These two people were actually my deep connection to Tamil. Iravatham Mahadevan was the one I learned all that I learned about ancient Tamil epigraphy, Sangam literature, and so on and so forth. Courier-based and his dictionary of contemporary Tamil is the one that I learned all my contemporary Tamil from. But more important, forget the dictionary. Courier-based was a dear friend. We worked together. I had the chance to work together with him at various points in time. In fact, it was he who introduced me initially to Iravatham Mahadevan, and sadly he passed away after just about managing to release the 3rd edition of the Kriya dictionary on the 13th of November. He released it on the 17th of November. He passed away. So I end this talk as a tribute to both Iravatham Mahadevan and Courier-based, and with feeling doubly sad to do so. And before I end and open the session up for questions, I would also like to acknowledge my organizers, my sponsors, Kudam Center, Suresh and his team, Aishwarya and Abhijit, who have been pillars of support, and the student community of the Barefoot Academy of Governance, which is tuned in with some enthusiasm to listen to what has by now become an endless talk, I think. And to all other audiences who have been patient, who have humored me and have taken the time and the trouble, despite the pandemic, the cyclone, and everything, to be here and to share this evening with me. Thank you very much. And I open this out to question. If there are no questions at the moment coming through, then what I'm going to do is I have some questions that were already given to me over mail during the previous sessions. I would simply take up those questions and discuss them.
Bhaskar, there's one question that's come in on the chat box. Maybe Abhijit can read it.
Yes, I'm seeing it. The Akkadians were already writing. Of course, they were writing. They had cuneiform writing. They had moved from the older proto-cuneiform writing to cuneiform writing. They had also moved from stamp seal production to cylinders seal production. The advancement of writing and the advancement of production of writing proceed at an altogether different pace and Mesopotamia compared to Indus. Indus invented the writing on its own, invented a writing system and a seal production system, both of which seems to have remained constant for most of its lifespan of 700 years, as opposed to the rapid changes that we witness in Sumeria in terms of not only the forms. For instance, here it's almost always on steatite. There they do the cuneiforms on precious stones. They use personal markers. There are personal owners. They put their names. It becomes personal branding. It becomes personal status symbol. It becomes so many other things besides. It becomes legal documents. It becomes so many other things besides in Mesopotamia, which we do not actually witness here in Indus. In Indus, we witness it as what we see on the markers. And for the first time, I think we are at least seeing a thread that it meant something, that it actually had a function, that it actually had a value or a purpose that it served. And of course, the purpose that I'm advancing is a hypothesis, and any Indus hypothesis should be taken with a pinch of salt. Any Indus hypothesis, the audience must be very, very clear in their mind. A person is more likely to be wrong than right. It should be understood in that context. But what the question to ask is that is there some kind of an incongruency with the times? Like, for instance, are we proposing rocket science in Indus times? Are we proposing that kind of an anachronism? Or are we introducing retrochronisms of Shiva Raja into for instance, into Indus? Or are we taking something that is completely outside their archaeological context and imposing it to the Indus vocabulary? We have to make sure that as long as these are not there in a hypothesis, that hypothesis is probably worthy of some consideration. And all of you have given it a lot of consideration already in terms of time. But that's the nature of the hypothesis, and it is with that tentative remark that I place all of it in front of you. Any other?
So can I ask you a question, sir? A few doubts I have.
Yes,
I'm
please.
Venkat Ramanujam.
Yes, please.
So first, let me. I'm very happy. It's a very wonderful lecture that you have provided, and your hypothesis is very interesting and compelling also to actually toe your line. But my understanding of Harappan scripts is very layman-like, very superficial from text. But from your lecture, a few doubts arise in my mind. Now you are referring to these field symbols as destinations. That's
Yes.
interesting, and particularly when we associate these different animals with different regions where they occur, there's every possibility it could have been so. But then in such case, then do we find these field symbols motifs predominantly in certain destination areas? For example, of course, is more of unicorn symbols found only in Mesopotamian region? Or are we able to identify what would be the region for the elephant, what would be the region for the tiger, and so on? Then in that case, there will be certainly exceptions, but bulk of those stamps that we find or seals that we find should be of a particular kind, particular motif in different regions.
Yes.
Do we find any evidence like that? That is one. I will ask a few of my doubts.
Okay.
The second is if a system such as this has been in place, which is very interesting and very obvious, considering itself urbanization, and we have very strong evidences of commercial connections with other contemporary civilizations. But then, if a trading system is practiced by the Mesopotamians, by the Harappans, then a similar system should have been followed by people who they were in touch also. So, do we find somewhat a similar system?
See, what we find
in this case, most prominently, we know about the Mesopotamians.
Yeah.
Are they practicing?
Let me answer these two questions in reverse order. The second question is yes. All other civilizations of that time, the coeval civilizations of that time, were practicing similar trade documentation and trade advices and so on and so forth. In fact, as we are able to clearly understand, the Mesopotamians were using it with greater fluency and with greater prevalence than the Indus people were. Egypt, of course, was also doing that. In fact, if you look at the Mesopotamian usage of cuneiform and cuneiform seal production and cuneiform seal information, you will find the advancement of cuneiform over a period of nearly 3,000 years and a number of historical uses and the changes over time that cuneiform experiences across materials, across regions, across dialects, across even several languages and so on and so forth. But Indus seems to have standardized itself and stayed in one place and never moved from there. Not much of movement from there. If there was movement, the movement was minimal and not much of movement. In fact, if we rewind on the Sumerian civilization, we can rewind the Sumerian civilization to such a state of stamp seal production with proto-cuneiform texts, which lasted for a while in the Mesopotamian civilization, but which it quickly moved out of and moved into cylinder seal production and cuneiform writing. So if we rewind on that, there must have been 100 or a 200-year period in which an analogous practice must have been evident in the Mesopotamian civilization. Definitely. Okay. As for your first question, is there a validation between what I call the elephant country and actually there is elephant population there, or what I call the tiger country and there is tiger population there? No such validation is available to me that I know of at the moment. We will have to have a lot of zoo archaeological records and population genetic studies that trains its focus on animals of that time to be able to obtain a record of that kind. But I think it is possible to obtain a record of that time if somebody mounts a concerted research effort in that direction, which may take years, but it is possible to come away with an answer that either counters this or supports this. Either way, it's possible to investigate it along those lines.
Okay, sir. Okay, thank you, sir. I have a couple of more questions.
Please go
But
ahead.
if you have time,
Please go ahead.
which is basically doubts which I do not know. That's why I'm asking this.
Please go ahead. Ask.
One, you spoke the
put on
cargo
your,
standards.
can you put on your
Sorry,
camera
yeah?
so you can see, the viewers can see you?
I don't know if I'm
Yeah.
visible. Yeah. Okay. So this question is basically I do not know. That's what I'm asking. You spoke about the cargo standard, which is before the unicorn that is there, and try to explain the different parts of it.
Yes.
Of course, in the unicorn it is very visible. Do we find similar cargo standards in elephants, tiger, and other seals also?
Yes. So I will show you. We find. I'll go to that. You see, there is an object in front of the elephant there, a manger, a feeding trough. Are you able to see in front of the?
No, I see that. Okay.
Yeah, in front of the tiger there is a feeding trough. In front of the elephant there is a feeding trough. In the particular seal that I am showing you, in front of the bison or the rhino, there is no feeding trough. But there are other seals that show them in front of feeding troughs. The only one animal that is never shown in front of a feeding trough object before it, and that is the zebu.
Okay. Okay. Thank you. And one, I shouldn't monopolize, but one last question. You spoke about the unicorn being found, and you also showed pictures of it in the Akkadian civilization.
Yes.
I was listening to a lecture on YouTube from Mark Kenoya.
Yes.
I might have no knowledge about it. Then he says that in that lecture, that unicorn is something very unique to the Harappan civilization.
In terms of,
I really do not know why.
Yeah, which is why you see I put an arguably here, and I should bold it.
Okay.
Yeah. Okay. So some people say that unicorn is native to Indus, and some people say that not only the unicorn but the Indus. Oh, sorry. What did I do? I did something and. Okay. So that it's a bold arguably. Some people say that the Indus borrowed the motif from Acadia, and but some people also say it is very much a native construct of the Indus Valley civilization. In fact, there are arguments that the unicorn survived as Rishyasringa, and then it found its way into the Vedas, and Buddhist literature, and then also into subsequent Hindu literature, and so on and so forth. There are many connections and heritage that is ascribed to the unicorn. As you would have noted here, I have largely confined myself to the material stories, materialistic culture, and the material stories of the Harappan civilization, rather than the religious or the literary or the spiritual narratives, that one tends to normally hear about.
Thank you so much, sir, for a clarification.
Anything, anybody else?
I think the questions that were sounded off in the email, maybe you could just reply them with that. We can also close it unless people have more questions to ask.
There doesn't seem to be any question coming up from anyone. In which case, I would be happy to close. Suresh, if you pass on the Sriraman's questions for the benefit of everybody, I can quickly answer those.
Which one?
Sriram, who shared a battery of questions with you over email.
I don't have them with me right now.
Aishwarya also had it. Okay, fine. Never mind. Those are the standard questions that get to be asked about Indus Valley civilization, whether it is Dravidian or Indo-Aryan, what is the language they spoke, the standard debates, public debates that go on, the political debates that go on. Questions largely tend to be of that nature. So if there is nothing further, we can close it here. And did we ever go live on YouTube or we didn't?
Yes, Bhaskar, we were live in YouTube.
What time on which slide did we go in?
I think it's just the second slide. We missed hardly around 30, 40 seconds, maximum 1 minute.
And were there many people there?
There were around 5 to 6 people there.
That's it. Okay. All right. Okay. Thank you for that information. So with that, we'll close what has been a fascinating journey personally for me to get back into this subject, which I had not cared to look at closely after the passing of Iravatham Mahadevan. I just did not have the mental strength to go back to it. I found the mental strength thanks in large measure to Suresh, who urged me to come out and share what I know with whoever is interested. But he, more than anybody else, thought that I had something worthwhile to say, and probably he thought it was more important than I myself think. So it is for that reason that I came out and decided to do this. And thanks very much for standing by and enabling this, Suresh and team. Suresh, maybe you would like to just offer some concluding remarks, after which we can close this call.
Yeah, thanks, Bhaskar. It was indeed a fascinating series of 4 talks. I think the numbers were actually realize it because a lot of people are coming back to the lectures and listening to it and then getting in touch with me. For the information of everybody, I was as much like any of you eagerly waiting for Bhaskar's exposition today about what the seals could possibly mean. I know he's been working on it. We have been talking about it, and he was excited. And I was much more excited about the fact that something new is coming. And indeed, it was brilliant, Bhaskar. I think it's, like you said, it's a big leap of faith, but it's a big leap of intellectual inference also. And only the future will tell how far this leap of inference is borne out. But
yes. Yes, I also, for me, though the talk series itself concludes today, I hope, for me, this is not the end, this is the beginning. And I hope I will continue to stay engaged with the subject and investigate it and try and find more and have them published and have them shared with the public through any means available to all of us.
I was just sending a message to a friend of mine that most often the most difficult understanding comes through suddenly, and when somebody else like you who has done this work over many years explains it in such a simple way, it suddenly feels like, hey, how did we miss this? So
yeah, for instance, that was the question that I asked about this container marker, because every paper that I read refers to the word container 100 times, and all the time it is sitting right next to them and they're seeing it all the time, but they don't connect the container, the word and the concept, the container, with this object that is tantalizingly there in front of us all the time. So yeah, sometimes you miss the obvious. Sometimes someone like me has the beginner's luck to decode things because I come with a fresh pair of eyes. That is in the unlikely event that I'm right. I'm saying so. Yeah. So there are many things like that. For instance, I think much of the debate and the emotional debate around the unicorn is because we are seeing it as the self. But the moment we see it as the other, we purge the whole lot of emotions attached to it. And we see it for what it is. We see it for a vibrant trade net, it for a smart mercantile class. We see a smart system that is able to successfully move goods without them getting lost. And we see a system that is able to keep records very nicely. and very elegantly and very economically, and so on and so forth. But the moment we see it as a self, a whole lot of excess baggage goes into that, and then we begin to read it in desperately mythological ways, and in all kinds. Then what happens is that we try to get into the mind of the Indus people rather than the object of the Indus people, and getting into the mind is that much more difficult, right? So if we can understand it in terms of the objects that they leave behind, and in terms of the expressions that they left behind, in terms of what they meant to communicate rather than what they were thinking within themselves, it is that much easier, and it becomes more accessible to all of us, and the so-called enigma can then be seen as some kind of enlightenment.
I'm reminded, Bhaskar, about Henry Schliemann and the discovery of Troy, and the fact that many people who had looked at Troy and said that the whole issue of the Helen of Troy is nothing else but a myth and not a reality, until somebody who had deep faith in the fact that there was a different way of understanding the Iliad, and that Troy did exist. He went there, spent huge amounts of time, money, effort, when everybody else looked at him in askance, and he finally did find out Troy. So as you were explaining today about the seals of Indus, and after you explained, I can very, very beautifully look at it, the 5,000-year history of modern day airport baggage and the baggage tag that is put up when you're going from Chennai to, say, New York, and you go through two other intermediary destinations, and it's all there in the same slip.
Yeah, this is the proto postal system. You see,
Correct.
it's not the actual postal system, which is more advanced. Okay, but this is the proto postal system. Okay, so we receive, we stamp, we forward. It sits in that time slot.
No, it is a very, very interesting way of explaining the seals, which does make a lot of sense. I would also say common sense. So much like Henry Schliemann found out Troy when others thought that it was not existing.
Well, I don't know if I'm worthy of that kind of parallel right now, so I don't want to be presumptuous. But thanks for bringing it up anyway. You learn, right?
I think today is worthy of a lot of celebration for all of us who have listened in. Thanks. I can see a lot of people who are there now, and a lot more people have dropped out in the last half an hour or 45 minutes. But at least 10 people have contacted me on the phone.
Thanks.
I would like to say thanks to all of you for coming in at various points in time. Thanks to Aishwarya and thanks to Abhijit for very ably holding this. And finally, thanks to you, Bhaskar. Thanks for a very, very intellectually stimulating 4 lectures. We hope that there are many more people who will see this. Students will see it. Researchers would see your various the 4 talks, and that the next time we come around, we explore more and more deeper into this. So thank you, everybody. With this, unless Bhaskar has anything to say, we would like to say thanks to everybody. As part of the Kudam lecture series, we are viewing this Kudam lecture series as a series of intellectual engagements based on the old traditional concept of Kudam, which is a 2,500-year-old cultural construct in Tamil Nadu, which has its equivalents all across India, as also, in fact, Asia, as a place where there will be a clash of ideas, a clash of knowledge, a clash of understandings. But out of this clash of ideas comes clarity. Each of us is welcome to hold our own differences, but it is a process of coming together to dialogue, to discuss where knowledge is created. We welcome you all. We will inform you about future Kudam lectures on a variety of themes, and our dialogues will continue forth. Thank you, everybody. Good night.
Thank you. Good night.